Welcome to Family Secrets Unveiled. We believe that behind every polished smile, every perfectly arranged home, there lies a story waiting to break free. These secrets aren't always loud. Sometimes they are a whisper, a silence held for too long, or a single object, heartbreakingly out of place. We step into a room where that silence has become deafening. Our story does not begin with a scream, but with the quiet, soft click of a suitcase zipper. Eliza, at 44, was a woman who lived by order. She was a professional archivist, not in a grand library, but a private specialist who restored old letters and preserved family histories for wealthy clients. Everything in her life was curated. Her home, a minimalist modern structure of glass and steel overlooking a quiet forest, was a testament to that. It was clean, deliberate, and perfectly silent. It was also a reflection of her 15-year marriage to Marcus. Marcus, at 51, was a successful international architect. He was the dreamer, the artist, while Eliza was the anchor. He soared, she was the ground. It was a balance she had come to trust. They had no children, a decision she thought had been mutual and early. Their devotion instead poured into their careers and their travels together, or, more often in recent years, his solo business trips. Marcus had just returned from 2 weeks in Kyoto, Japan, for a symposium on sustainable design. It had been, by all accounts, a normal trip. He returned tired but inspired, bearing meticulously wrapped small gifts, a Rockaware tea set for her, some high-grade green tea. Life had slotted back into its predictable rhythm. It was a Tuesday morning, the air crisp with an autumn chill that pressed against the large panes of glass. Marcus had left for his office, leaving Eliza to her rituals. One of those rituals was the laundry and the unpacking of his luggage. She had always done this. She liked the way it restored order after the chaos of travel. His suitcase, a sleek, graphite Toomey, lay open on their king-size bed. Everything was as expected: suits destined for the dry cleaner, worn shirts, a depleted toiletry bag. As she pulled out the last pair of shoes, her fingers felt something snag against the bottom lining. It was a small detail, an imperfection in an otherwise seamless design. More curious than suspicious, she ran her fingernail along the seam. She found it, a hidden zipper almost invisible to the eye. It was designed not to be found. Her hand paused. Marcus was a private man, but she had always attributed this to the privacy of genius, not of secrecy. She pulled the tab. It opened a thin, flat compartment, clearly meant for documents. Inside, there was a sheaf of papers. Not a passport, not travel documents. It was a stack of heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the kind one uses for the most formal of invitations. It was bound with a single jade-green silk ribbon. Eliza lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. The top sheet was not a letter or a contract. It was titled, in an elegant, elaborate script. She read the line, "My vows to Seraphina." Eliza's heart stopped. Seraphina? The name felt foreign, lyrical, like something from an old poem. It was not his mother's name, not his sister's, not the name of any client she had ever heard him mention. She fumbled with the ribbon. The cards fanned open. These were not old vows, not a memento from some youthful romance. The ink was fresh. The paper was crisp. The faint, sharp smell of high-grade laser printing still clung to it, mingled with the faint scent of bergamot from Marcus's cologne that lingered in the suitcase lining. She read the next lines, and her orderly world began to fracture. "My dearest Seraphina," it began. "In this life and the next, my promise is eternal." The words flowed across the page. They spoke not just of love, but of a spiritual devotion, of an unbreakable bond, of waiting until the stars themselves grow cold. These were the words of a man preparing to commit his entire being to a woman. That woman was not her. Her husband of 15 years, the man with whom she had built a life of quiet control, was apparently planning a wedding. The betrayal wasn't just in the affair. That would have been bad enough. It was in the ceremony, the planning, the calculated romance of it. The suitcase, his trusted companion on his worldly travels, had become his silent accuser. The silence in their perfect glass house was suddenly oppressive, heavy, and terrifyingly cold. Eliza stood there, holding the proof of a life she knew nothing about, and the only question that echoed in the void was, who is Seraphina? The initial shock did not give way to hysterics. Eliza was not the sort of woman to scream or throw things. She was an archivist. Her instinct was to collect, collate, and analyze. She placed the vows back in the secret compartment, zipped it closed, and placed the suitcase back in the closet, right where Marcus would expect it to be. She had lived for 15 years in a state of controlled equilibrium, and she would not be the one to shatter it, not yet. Instead, she would observe. She needed data. Her silence was her weapon. That evening, Marcus returned home, kissed her on the cheek, and talked about the symposium. He spoke of innovative solar panels and the aesthetics of wabi-sabi. Eliza nodded, smiled, and handed him a glass of wine, all the while her mind was dissecting every word, every gesture. She watched. She needed an opening. But the suspicion was eating at her. She began to notice the small things she had previously dismissed as the habits of his work. The phone calls he took in his study, with the door closed. The late nights at the office, that seemed to an awful lot of evenings. The subtle distance, an invisible wall of glass between them that she had once mistaken for mutual respect for space. Now, she saw it for what it was, a barrier. She decided against confronting him with the vows directly. If he was planning a new life, he was already proficient at concealment. A direct accusation would only make him defensive. Instead, she began her own investigation. She waited until he was sound asleep, his steady breathing filling the dark room. She slipped from the bed, padding silently to his office. She opened his laptop. She knew the password. It was the date they met. The irony was acidic. She began to search. Seraphina. No emails. No messages. No search history. He was careful. But Marcus, for all his care, was a man of systems. Eliza turned her attention to the finances. He managed their investments, another area she had happily ceded to him. She logged into their joint accounts. Everything was normal. And then she found it, a separate account, one she had never known existed. It had been opened 16 years ago, just before their own marriage. This account was not for lavish spending. There were no high-end hotel bills or expensive jewelry purchases. Instead, there was one payment. A recurring, significant payment made on the first of every month without fail. The amount was always the same, a large number, enough to cover an expensive mortgage. The recipient was not an individual. It was a corporation, Eternal Life Solutions. The name sent a chill down Eliza's spine. Eternal Life Solutions. It sounded cold, clinical, and deeply ominous. She did a quick search for the company. Their website was vague, filled with corporate jargon about long-term care management, medical trust solutions, and personal preservation. It did not look like a wedding planning company. It looked like a place for the dying or, worse, the undead. Desperation began to set in. This was not a simple affair. This was something more complex, something darker. Who was Seraphina, that she required Eternal Life Solutions? Eliza's rage began to curdle into a vague, formless dread. She went back to his suitcase, digging in that secret compartment again, thinking perhaps she had missed something. And she had. This time, her fingers searched past the fabric lining. Tucked deep in the corner, almost fused with the seam, was a small, cold object. It wasn't a document. It was a key. It was not a house key or a car key. It was an old-fashioned, ornate brass key, yet the teeth were strangely modern and complex. Attached to it was a small, plastic tag, with only one thing embossed on it, A113. The key. The payments. The vows. Eliza sat on the cold floor of their walk-in closet, the darkness enveloping her. Marcus wasn't just planning a future with Seraphina, he was actively maintaining a present, an expensive and highly guarded secret. The betrayal now felt infinitely deeper. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about a parallel life, a massive financial and emotional commitment he had hidden from her for their entire marriage. Her sense of isolation was absolute. She realized the man sleeping just meters away, the man she had shared her life with, was a complete and total stranger. And she was holding the key, perhaps, to unlocking who he really was. The silence in the house became unbearable. Every tick of the clock, every creak of the house as it settled in the night, seemed to be counting down to a truth Eliza both dreaded and desperately needed to know. She could not go on, could not breathe in this space of orderly falsehood for one more day. The next morning, she told Marcus she was visiting a client upstate, an easy lie, as it was something she rarely did. She took the key, A113. She had looked up the address for Eternal Life Solutions. It was not in a medical complex. It was tucked away on a private, heavily wooded estate an hour outside the city, protected by high walls and a security gate. It looked more like a high-end data center or a private research facility than a healthcare institution. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she drove up to the gate. She gave her name and lied, saying she had an appointment regarding the Vanderkamp unit. Vanderkamp. It was Marcus's mother's maiden name. Another layer of concealment. To her surprise, the gate opened. Apparently, Marcus had arranged for her to have access, perhaps for an emergency she never knew was possible. She followed the winding drive to a low, modern building that blended into the landscape. Inside, the air was cool and still, scented only with a faint hum of air filtration. A nurse in crisp white scrubs, not hospital scrubs, but something more akin to a high-end spa uniform, nodded at her and pointed down a hallway. The atrium wing. A113 is at the end, the nurse said, her voice flat. Eliza walked on the polished marble floors. The place didn't smell of disinfectant. It smelled of money and stillness. She reached A113. It was a heavy, mahogany door, unlike a hospital room. The lock was the complex, brass mechanism that precisely matched the key in her hand. She took a deep breath, her shaking hand inserting the key. It turned smoothly. She pushed the door open. The room was not dark. It was flooded with soft, natural light from a massive skylight, illuminating what looked more like a luxury hotel suite than a patient room. There was elegant furniture, a bookshelf filled with leather-bound volumes, and walls painted a serene blue. But in the center of the room, where a grand bed should have been, there was a high-tech medical bed. A constellation of machines surrounded it, screens displaying rhythmic lines, IVs dripping clear liquids. And in the bed, there was Seraphina. She was tragically beautiful. Thick, dark hair fanned out on the pillow, her skin like porcelain, unlined. She looked to be in her early 30s. Her eyes were closed, but she was not sleeping. She was connected to a ventilator, its soft, rhythmic sigh the only sound breaking the mechanical silence. She was in a vegetative state. This was Seraphina. Eliza staggered back. But the worst shock was yet to come. The room was a shrine. The walls weren't just painted, they were covered in framed photographs. Marcus and Seraphina. Much younger. They were laughing on a sailboat. They were embracing on a mountaintop. And on the bedside table, in a heavy silver frame, was their wedding picture. They looked radiant, vibrantly alive. Then Eliza saw the leather-bound book on the desk. She opened it. It was not a journal. It was a medical file. Seraphina Vanderkamp. Vanderkamp, not his name. His mother's name. She read the diagnosis: severe anoxic brain injury. The result of a skiing accident. The date of admission: 20 years ago. 6 months after the wedding photo was taken. The truth hit Eliza like a wall of ice. Seraphina was not Marcus's new lover. She was his first wife. Marcus had never divorced her. He had been paying Eternal Life Solutions to keep her alive, suspended in this half-life, for 2 decades. Eliza's 15-year marriage was a sham. Legally, she wasn't sure if she was his wife at all. Emotionally, she certainly wasn't. She was the placeholder, the living, breathing woman who had filled the void left by his real, immobile wife. The vows. She understood instantly. They weren't for a new wedding. They were an anniversary ritual. He had gone to Kyoto, perhaps where they had honeymooned, and he had written new vows for their 20th wedding anniversary. He was renewing his eternal promise to a woman who couldn't hear him, while his second wife was back home, unknowingly unpacking his luggage. Eliza looked at the beautiful, still woman in the bed, and she felt no jealousy. She felt a profound, cold horror. She realized that both of them, Eliza and Seraphina, were trapped by the same man, one imprisoned by the past and the other deceived by the present. Eliza did not leave. She sat down in the plush armchair opposite the bed, the key A113 still clenched in her hand. She watched the rhythmic sigh of the ventilator, watched the steady green line dance across the monitor. She had spent her life preserving other people's pasts, and she now realized she had been living in a present built entirely on a buried one. She waited. The silence of the room was sepulchral, but it was also painfully clarifying. She was no longer angry. She just felt a vast, cold emptiness. How long did she wait? Hours. The light from the skylight began to shift into the amber tones of late afternoon. At 6 o'clock, as if on schedule, the door opened softly. Marcus walked in. He was not carrying his briefcase. He was carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. He saw Eliza first, and for one suspended moment, his face was completely blank, not of guilt, not of shock, but the blankness of an actor caught removing his costume. Then he looked at the lilies in his hand, then back at Eliza, and his entire being seemed to collapse inward. He didn't try to lie. There was no point. The truth was in the room, as tangible as the woman in the bed. "Tuesdays, I thought you had a board meeting," Eliza said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "You were coming here." "Eliza," he started, his voice thick. "I can explain." "Explain," she repeated. "Explain that you've kept your first wife on life support for 20 years? That our marriage, our home, our life, was an organized distraction? That you have lied to me every single day for 15 years. The story, finally, came tumbling out. He told her about Seraphina. They were college sweethearts. She was fire, she was adventure, she was everything to him. The accident in the Alps, just 6 months after their wedding. The doctors said there was no hope, that he should let her go. He couldn't. He couldn't sign the paper. So he used his family money, the Vanderkamp money, to move her here, the best place where she could be cared for. He had met Eliza 2 years later. He said he truly loved her. He did love her. She was so calm, so organized. She was the order to his agonizing chaos. She was his safe harbor. A harbor, Eliza said, the word tasting like acid. Not a wife. I was a caretaker, while you waited for a miracle or perhaps for death. You made me the other woman in my own marriage. It wasn't like that, he said desperately, taking a step toward her. Then what were the vows, Marcus? She asked, her voice now sharp as a scalpel. You went to Kyoto to renew your vows. To her. Marcus had no answer. He just looked at the woman in the bed, and in that look, Eliza saw the entire truth. He had never left her. He was trapped in the moment she fell on the snow, and he had pulled Eliza into that suspended animation with him. Eliza stood up. I'm an archivist, Marcus, she said, her voice terrifyingly steady. I preserve things that are dead. I will not become one of them. She looked at the still woman one last time, a strange surge of pity rising. Seraphina was a victim too, imprisoned by a love that wouldn't let go. Eliza walked over to Marcus. He looked old, defeated. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply removed her wedding ring, a simple, platinum band, the symbol of the order and permanence she had believed in. She pressed it into his open palm, next to the bouquet of lilies intended for his other wife. You built your life around a secret, she said. Now you can live in it. She walked out of the room, closing the heavy mahogany door behind her, leaving him alone with his 2 wives, the one he had lost to the past, and the one he had just lost to the present. The story doesn't tell where Eliza went, but it said she started over, somewhere no one knew her name, leaving behind the perfect glass house and the suitcase that had revealed it all. We build our lives on trust, on the daily rituals we share with the person we love. But as this story shows, sometimes the most devastating truths aren't found in angry screams, but in the silent, secret compartments of the luggage we unpack ourselves. Thank you for joining us at Family Secrets Unveiled. If this story of a buried truth has made you think, please like this video. Stories like this exist in the shadows, and the only way to bring them to light is to share them. Subscribe to our channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss another secret as it's uncovered. You never know what you might find when you truly start to look.